people. It's your Negro with APTitude and host of the BLACKboard, Mickee Lee. Hoping you guys are having a fabulous weekend and welcoming you to the weekend wrap-up. Hey, things are moving ever more quickly and changing every single day. Something is up. And as you know, on this channel, we just don't report the news or talk about a topic just to be talking about it. It has an overarching position in the end time game, both for this country and the world. And on this channel, we're devoted to making sure we bring you education so that you can be empowered to be on the right side of eternity. This week, we're talking about the ever given, which is given lots of problems, Biden's credit freeze, anti-Asian black hate, and the jab apartheid. Let's get into it. If you're anything like me, you have been calling the gigantic gargantuan container ship the Ever Given. You have been calling it the Evergreen. I mean, I just couldn't understand why so many people were making such a huge mistake in the media. Well, it turns out that the Ever Given is owned by the Evergreen Marine Corps. So for those of you who are wondering why they kept calling the Evergreen the Ever Given, this is why. The Ever Given is the name of the ship. The Evergreen is the name of the company that owns it. Kinda, sorta. This ship is a great lesson in globalization and why it was a huge mistake and remains a huge mistake for the United States to have put all of its eggs in that basket. And we, the American people, are going to start finding out very soon what a huge problem that is as well. Now, the Ever Given is actually flagged in Panama. It means it's registered in Panama, but it's owned by two Japanese firms. And on top of it, it is being held by a Taiwanese-based company that is leasing the cargo container ship, and that is the Evergreen Marine Corporation there in Taiwan. Then the technical manager is from Germany, and they were responsible for hiring the Indian, as in East India, the Indian crew. On top of that, I have heard some outlets report that the driver of the ship or the captain of the ship was a woman. So, hey, they got a lot of fingers pointing in a lot of different directions, but this is what we need to know. The fact that the ship was lodged in the Suez Canal for the better part of a week is cost roughly $1 billion in toll fees for Egypt. Egypt would have collected about $1 billion in that same period of time, had all the ships gone through clearly, and Egypt wants their cut. There's also about $1 billion per day of trade that was held up each day because of this ship. There's lots of containers filled with items, including live animals that will probably be dead by now. And I have done other broadcasts about the animal situation and about how the authorities, both in the United States and in Europe in particular, have used the COVID situation to make owning animals, raising animals, small animal husbandry, and things like that a dirty game. And so they are actually literally in England going around and gassing people's chickens, and they say they will come after your dogs and cats. I will save that maybe for next week and do either an independent report on it or bring it to you in the weekend wrap up. But this is how serious the folks are that want to get rid of actual livestock and meat. I'm all for the animals. Anybody who knows me knows that I am a huge animal advocate. And I also come from a Christian point of view, which means that I know that we don't actually need to eat meat. The body was made to eat plants and the fruit of trees and not meat. We were given permission to eat meat by God, and I don't know why he did that, and he hasn't told me, and I haven't found the answer in the Bible. But that's how humans evolved to or came about eating meat. That said, going in people's homes and gassing their chickens and then gassing threatening to gas their cats and dogs, that's a whole nother ballgame, but that's where we are. The aftermath of the Ever Given being stuck for all of those days means that other cargo ships went the long way around Africa, a 15,000-mile detour. It also means that there will be backlog for months. What it means for us in real time is that since the United States is part of the global shipping system, and the global shipping system is based on just in time, it means that a lot of products are going to start disappearing or not be available for a long period of time. So if you've been on this channel for any length of time, you know that I've been telling you to stock up on food for a few years now. You know that I've been telling you for more than a year to plant a little garden, or at least get you a little hydroponic system inside so you can start planting a little bit of food. Because along with everything else that's going on, the aftermath of the COVID, the dumping of all the dollars into the system, which is raising inflation, you have incidents like this that many people believe were on purpose. And I've seen enough evidence that I certainly think that's a possibility. So things are going to get a little rough. And so that's the reason why I'm reporting on the Ever Given. There are other people who can go into far more depth, but I want you to understand it, my audience to understand it from the much larger perspective of how this country is being dismantled and the New World Order is being implemented. So as part of his administration's commitment to ending racial inequality and narrowing the wealth gap primarily between blacks and Hispanics, President Joe Biden is considering a proposal from a liberal-based think tank called Demos, who proposes that he get rid of the major publicly traded reporting agencies, Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. If he has his way, he would create a public, meaning government-run credit reporting agency, the CRA, to compete with those three privately owned companies, the three privately owned credit bureaus, and possibly replace them. Now, before you start doing your happy dance, you really need to learn to read between the lines, especially nowadays. The first issue is this. If President Joe Biden and any other president, for that matter of fact, really wanted to narrow the gap, the wealth gap between whites and blacks, the first thing they would stop doing is joining blacks with Hispanics at the hip. We are not the same people. We do not have the same experience. Hispanics are treated far better than black people are. If black people were treated as well as Hispanics, we'd have nothing to complain about. The fact that 200,000 people who are supposedly poor and destitute and running for their lives can come up with roughly $3,500 per person. $3,500 per person to give to a coyote to enter the United States illegally, at which point they are funneled into one of many thousands of networks in which they are given a job, whether they can do the job or not, whether they speak English or not, and most of them don't, and we know that they're here illegally. This already means they have a leg up over native-born Black Americans who are yet to be treated as Americans. So the first thing that President Biden and any other president would do if they really cared about the wealth gap that Black people face would be to stop joining us at the hip with Hispanics. The second thing they would do is to enforce the existing immigration laws. And since I'm told we're in a pandemic, which means that at every turn, people are concerned that a mere cough will cause them to die of COVID-19, even though it still has a 99.9% recovery rate. Someone please explain to me why we have 200,000 people on our southern border right now, and the president is not turning these people away. But yet he is insisting that you and I wear our masks, continue to social distance, and as you will see later in this report, getting ready to implement jab apartheid on those people who dare say, hey, I haven't been sick in over a year. I'm not exposed to anybody who's sick. I don't need no damn vaccination. Thank you very much. You see, this getting rid of privately owned and publicly traded credit reporting bureaus would also give the government more access to your records than they already have. Now, some months ago, I reported to you guys on the social credit system that China has implemented for many, many years. And under that social credit system, if you're so much caught jaywalking, you are exposed to a lot of public criticism and public shaming. Your credit score, your social credit score determines which jobs you're able to apply for, where you can live, where you go to school, what neighborhoods you are allowed to hang out in, and indeed your social circle. In some areas of the country, it even determines what food is available to you. If you don't think this is coming to a United States near you, you are not thinking. As I said, I don't spend time reporting on topics just to be reporting on them. It is to empower you with education so that you choose the right side of eternity. The last thing I'm going to say about the President Biden's change where he's to the credit reporting and scoring, and he wants to use racial inequality, which the only inequality that exists in this nation is anti-black equality. That's it. Anti-black. Everybody else has been repaired. Everybody else has been accepted. There is not one single aspect of your life, not one, that hasn't been made possible by what Black people fought, bled, and died for, and finally came into fruition through the civil rights legislation. And let's take a quick sidebar and a lesson. Civil rights does not mean the Black people's rights. It means the people's rights. Civil means the people's rights. The only people who have not benefited from the civil rights legislation is Black folks. So, President Biden, in his ever-liberal administration, and I am neither a liberal nor a conservative, I am neither a Democrat nor a Republican, I am an independent-thinking, Black-first, Black-only person, unapologetically, and I smell a rat. If President Biden is allowed to shut down privately held credit reporting agencies and replace them with the government. First of all we have to do is look at the fiasco of rolling out the money through the EIDL loan and the SBA. Now, if you're a small business owner like me, the PPP process went fairly smoothly. The EIDL process has had a lot of jumps and hoops. Right now, although your business may have been devastated, you and you may have received the $1,000 advance from the EIDL program last March. Maybe you got in like me and got the advance, the $1,000 advance. It turns out it was supposed to be $10,000 per employee. And so if you're a sole proprietor with no other employees other than yourself, you were supposed to at least get $10,000, but you only got $1,000. So that's a huge problem. And then instead of correcting that and giving the remaining balance to those who had already received the EIDL loan, instead, they rolled out legislation requiring you to live in a low-income neighborhood. Well, what if you're like me and you lost 80% of your income from your business, but you don't live in a quote-unquote low-income neighborhood? Though, again, you can't go by that because we got plenty of homeless people living in our neighborhood. And so I'm not supposed to get an invitation to receive the balance of my loan until the people who live in low-income neighborhoods get their loan when they may not have qualified for it in the first place. So you get to see how this nonsense from the government is not streamlined, does not help people get back on their feet, does not help the economy, just like dumping all this money into the economy. But yet they want to go beyond that and be able to determine, what your credit score is. I smell a rat, otherwise known as some BS. Listen, all Biden has to do is to enforce the existing agency, which is the Credit Protection Agency or something of that name, ensure that they're doing their job properly, making sure that people have a streamlined way to report all the credit inaccuracies on the credit reports. And my understanding is there's at least 70% of credit reports have at least one inaccuracy, and I know mine does. Making a streamlined way to get rid of those credit inaccuracies and a streamlined way for people to get in touch with the credit agencies would go a lot further than creating another huge bureaucracy, which ultimately would just give the government far more power over you. So, not impressed with this president so far in many, many ways. Not the least of which the duplicity of letting in 200,000 people over the border while you're telling me to keep wearing my mask and I better get a shot. Yet you shut down my business and you're making it hard for me to get the money that I would have made had you not shut down my business. Alrighty then. Next up, anti-Asian black hate. Okay. So I know I'm not the only one that has been reporting on this narrative that black folks are just looking to beat up on any Asian anywhere at any time. First of all, although we have a lot of reason to beat up on a lot of people, not just white people, but their white-aligned allies who exist in all of these other groups of people of choice. Not people of color, people of choice. And they routinely exercise that choice to undermine black people. And among those people of choice are Asians. While we have a lot of provocation, that's just not our get down. And anybody who's being honest about how black people are, they know full well that we don't just run around beating up on people who don't look like us. We are far more dangerous to ourselves than we are to anybody else. And that's just a fact. Now, there have been a couple of black looking people that have gone after people who happen to be Asian. But as has been warned several times, there is no evidence thus far to state that these people were chosen specifically because they were Asian. Now, I want you to juxtapose this with the guy who went and killed 6 Asians or 8 Asians in Georgia in the spas. He drove from spa to spa and killed these people. And the excuse they gave for him was that he was just having a bad day. And you do not hear Asian commentaries either on the national news or in any other aspect of social media going after white people. No, of course they wouldn't. Because they're employed by whites. They're married to whites. They have been lifted up, even though they have a lot of entrepreneurship in their among the various Asian groups. They have been lifted up and ensured success in this country by all of the government handouts and support they have been given, from education to employment and to highly profitable places to live, and business and entrepreneurial advantage. So these are all facts. So now they're not going to go after white folks, but there's going to be a continued preaching that black folks are behind all the hatred to Asians, even though it's been black people who have fought for everybody else and have co-signed and caped for everybody else from the beginning, while none of y'all have done the same for us. So while we are, while this narrative is going on, and you have the national media pushing this narrative, the interesting thing is there's been an awful lot of silence about what has been happening from Asians towards blacks. So while Asians say they have a zero tolerance for hatred, we know that as soon as the Wuhan virus, the coronavirus, the Chinese virus, the pandemic went worldwide, the first thing that China started doing was deporting Africans. And if they didn't deport the Africans, then they quarantined them and refused to let them leave their apartments. If they weren't doing that, they refused to allow them into public facilities. There's even a video out there of a pregnant African woman who was trying to go to an appointment at her prenatal appointment at the hospital, and she was refused entry there. But you see, nobody's talking about that. They're not talking about the deaths of Natasha Harlan. They're not talking about the many incidents in which black people have been beaten on, choked out, or just had Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, and Vietnamese talking nastily about them, while at the same time accepting their money in hair, in nail salons, beauty supply stores, food restaurants, and liquor stores, and the etc. See, if black people were to keep their black dollars to themselves, we wouldn't be dealing with none of this, because we wouldn't be in your stores. And while I do not condone violence and hatred against anyone, I absolutely do not condone a false narrative that is going out accusing black people of doing something that we haven't done to anyone, even our most staunch enemies. And while the same time that we are being called this instrument of hatred, you have the quote-unquote victim is silent about what they have been doing for more than a year in response to being accused of starting the pandemic. That's a little like the little yellow teapot calling the kettle black. And let's talk about what these attacks are, shall we? Let's look at the report that just came out a month ago, or actually not even a month ago, a few weeks ago, that talks about the nature of the roughly 3,800 anti-Asian. And again, that's dubious, because they're not telling us how they know that this was happening specifically because the person is Asian. That's missing from the report. So how do we know that this particular quote unquote hate crime or racial attack was specifically because the person is Asian? But if you look at the data, 68% of it, 2/3 of it, is verbal harassment and shunning. Verbal harassment and shunning. Both of these things, Asians of every persuasion routinely do to black folks, but it doesn't go reported. Now, I deeply regret those people who have lost their lives recently. One is a neighbor of mine. He lived apparently just 2 blocks away from me. I'm certain that I passed this man multiple times over the past 10 years that I've lived in this neighborhood. I probably passed him on the street. And I do not like the fact that he lost his life, and especially in such a senseless manner. That said, if we are going to push towards racial equality, it can't just be black people fighting for it. You all have to change your own groups and work within your own groups to see the hatred that you have and to discuss why you have anti-black hatred in the first place. And then you must come to grips with the fact of what black people have done and sacrificed for that makes your life possible. And once we're all under the same standard and we're on the same page, then we can stop everybody's hatred. Now, when Black Lives Matter came out, everybody said, all lives matter. All right. Well, then it shouldn't be just stop Asian hate.
Last up tonight.
Let's just stop
jab
hate.
apartheid.
Okay?
That's right. Jab apartheid. Now, under President Biden's administration, the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine has greatly accelerated. And there are lots of people who have gone to get their vaccine, parts 1 and 2, despite the fact that some people have died very shortly after getting the vaccine. Others have become very ill shortly after getting the vaccine. Some high-profile people have also lost their lives very shortly after getting the vaccine. But many people have gone out and gotten the vaccine. And I say to each their own, if that's what a person feels comfortable with, although in some cases it's actually being mandated as a part of employment, which I do not agree with. But if a person feels that they would be more comfortable, feel safer going to get the vaccine, I think that's what they should do, in the same way that people go and get flu shots and other people don't. So if it were left there, that would not be an issue. However, it is not. The facts are that the news reports that even though you get the vaccine, you can still be a carrier of the COVID-19 virus. You can still infect other people. The other issue is you are still expected to wear your mask, social distance, and although traveling options are opening up, they still advise against any quote-unquote unnecessary travel. Then there is the issue of getting the vaccines to quote-unquote poor nations. So while the Americans are told that they need to get their vaccines right away, and in fact many people are shamed for saying, no, I'm not going to get a vaccine. At the same time, both Canada and Mexico are standing with their hands out for the United States to help them. So I'm mentioning this because a popular narrative in the Black community is that we just need to do for self and we just need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. The data shows over and over and over again, and has for the past 400 years, we are actually the only people in this country who pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and do for self. For everyone else, a handout is a way of life, and even in the midst of a pandemic, you have quote unquote poor countries like Canada and Mexico, where the average household income is $55,000 per year, they have their hands out to be given the vaccine. And in fact, someone recently reported on the number of Mexicans who have crossed into the United States simply to get the vaccine. And they also report not having to provide any ID, not having to provide proof that they should be in the country. They just showed up and they got their vaccine. So much for laws. Then there's the last part to this little story. Now, some months ago in the fall of last year, I reported to you guys that a vaccine passport was already being bandied about. The idea for a vaccine passport was already being developed, and that such an item, a health passport, already existed in China. Again, whatever's going on in China will eventually make its way to the United States. So now the same is being rolled out here in California. So people who can show proof that they've gotten their vaccine will now be allowed to go to concerts, for example, or the gym, or other facilities. So even if you haven't gotten the vaccine and there is no proof that you have been sick or are even a carrier, you're going to be guilty until you get that vaccine. Even though, as I stated earlier, getting the vaccine does not mean you are not a carrier or do not have the ability to infect others. So I want you guys to put on your thinking cap, and I want you to really start to analyze everything that's going on using this COVID-19 as a backdrop. More intrusion into your personal life, more incentivization for people to report on you, more normalization of shaming if you don't go along with the crowd. Funny thing is, smokers will pull their mask up over their face when they see me outside without a mask. But it doesn't occur to them, my breathing isn't harming them, but their smoking certainly harms me and all of the dozens and dozens of people that they expose to their cigarette smoke just in one cigarette alone. So the world is really upside down, topsy-turvy. And as I've said, I report on things to wake you up, educate you about what's going on, give you a chance to be empowered. My hope and prayer is that you will choose to cling to Jesus Christ, because he's the only one that can get you safely from here to over there. But even if you decide not to do that, at least you have a heads up about what's coming. So it's your Negro with APTitude and host of the BLACKboard, Mickee Lee, signing off. But before I do, I ask you to please, if you find value in this video, please like the video. Please share the videos. A lot of people have absolutely no idea what's going on. And please let me know what you think of any of the stories in the comments below. I'll see you in the next video.